Okay, so the book of Deuteronomy. We're really doing it, you guys. The years of the Torah. This is the final book of the Torah. It's also, no, it's not the longest book. Genesis would be that. But it's, now that we're in it, it's my favorite book. When we were in Genesis, that was my favorite book. But now that we're in Deuteronomy, this is my favorite one. Here's the kind of interesting stuff that we didn't get to talk about quite last week. So Deuteronomy is the name that this book has received in the Christian tradition. And did I say last week what Deuteronomy means? Does anybody remember? Yeah, so Deutero. Do we use Deutero in any way in English anymore? Deutero. Yeah, well, so it's the Greek word. Deuteros is a Greek word for two. And then nami comes from the Greek word namas, so it literally means a second law. A second law, that's what it means. The law a second time. Because what is at the core of this book, chapters 12 through 26, is a whole additional collection of a body of legal material. And it's all laws. Most of them are laws that we've heard before. We heard many of these in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And they're repeated a second time. Why are they repeated a second time right here, if you think through the flow of the storyline? Who has not heard firsthand, as adults, many of the words of the Torah? Right, the second generation. So in the flow of the storyline, this is now the children of the Exodus generation, and as we're going to see, Moses is going to be addressing them and all future generations of Israel. What's interesting, look at the first words of the book in chapter 1, and you remember how most of the books of the Torah actually in Hebrew get their names just from the first sentences here. So in Hebrew, the name of the book in Hebrew is not Deuteronomy, it's These Are the Words. These are the words. That's the name of this book. Or just the words. The words. Put your thumb here and flip forward to chapter 5 with me. And if you look forward to chapter 5, there's kind of a little intro, but what do you have in chapter 5? The Ten Commandments. Again, because this is the second giving of the law. So they happened in Exodus chapter 20, right when the people got to Mount Sinai, but we're going to go over them again, and then go down. So those are the Ten Commandments. And here's what's interesting, is that the Ten Commandments in Hebrew are actually never called the Ten Commandments. They are called the 10 words. And the Hebrew word for word is the word dabar, which means word. It's the word that means word. So the book in Hebrew is called, these are the devarim, the words, and at the beginning of this section, which we'll talk about the structure of the book in a minute, it begins with the 10 words, and that's what these are called all throughout the Hebrew Bible. They're never actually called the 10 Commandments. They're called the 10 words. Okay, go back to chapter 1 with me. So let me get the. I'm supposed to be recording my screen, aren't I? Somebody. Here, sorry, 1 second. I think I remember screen recording. Yes. Okay. What was I going to do? I was going to do something. Oh, yes, I was going to show you the map. Here we go. So this is the map that we've been using for a while here. So all of Israel, the second generation here, they're right up here in what are called the plains of Moab, up in the hills overlooking, here's the Dead Sea right here. Jerusalem and Jericho are right across the Dead Sea in the Jordan Valley. So all the people are planted right here. And literally, the book of Deuteronomy is the action of the story stops completely. Remember, in the story up so far, you'd get a block of law, and then you get some stories, and then another block of law, and then some stories. In Deuteronomy, there is no action whatsoever. There's none. The narrative stops right here for 34 chapters, and it's just the people camped out on the plains of Moab right before they go into the land. And let's just dive in. We're going to overview the whole structure of the book because it's really interesting, but we'll just dive into the first sentences here. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel in the desert east of the Jordan, that is, in the Arabah. You know, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Lavan, Hatzeroth, Dizahav, you know, those places, right? Now, it takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir road. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses proclaimed to the Israelites all that Yahweh had commanded him concerning them. Now, just stop real quick there. You're supposed to either wince or snicker or something. Did you catch that? There's something that happened right there. It's a little speed bump. Look up at verse 2 again. What's Horeb? What's Horeb? Yeah, probably it's been a long time since we talked about that. Mount Sinai goes by two names in the Bible, and they likely are just like regional dialect names or something. People called it different things in different areas. Do we have what's like that around Portland? It actually has two names depending on what part of town you grew up in. 39th, there's Cesar Chavez. That's a great example. I grew up on Hawthorne. It's still 39th to me. But somebody who moved to Portland, what year was the name changed? Yeah, it's Wikipedia. Somebody look it up. Right, yes, Cesar Chavez. That's a great idea. It's exactly like that kind of thing. So Mount Sinai is also called Mount Horeb in a number of places, particularly in Deuteronomy. So it takes 11 days to go from Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb, you can see that down here, Mount Sinai or Horeb, 11 days to go from here to Kadesh Barnea. Now, what happened at Kadesh Barnea again? It's so early, I know, don't worry about it. Kadesh Barnea was where they sent out the 12 spies to go spy out the land, and that was the beginning of all the events that led to the downfall of the wilderness generation. So in other words, he's saying, if you're going at a good pace, you can go from here all the way up to here in 11 days. Now, what year is it right now in verse 3? It's the 40th year. The 40th year of what? Right, since the incident at Kadesh Barnea. So this is it's already off the, I don't know what when you start a race, what do you call it when you start a race and you're here and then you go that? Off the blocks. Anyway, already off the blocks? I don't know. Anyway, so from the beginning of the book, we're reminded of everything that came before and of the fact that this is the second generation. What should have taken 11 days took 40 years because of Israel's stubbornness and disobedience. Let's keep going. Verse 4. This was after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, and at Edrei. He defeated Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. These were the battles that were recorded about 10 chapters ago in Numbers over here on the east side of the Jordan. East of the Jordan, in the territory of Moab, Moses began to expound this law, saying, and then he goes on. Are there any other translations of expound? Moses began to explain. Yeah. This is the word for either exposit or teach or to make clear. It's used in Habakkuk once to describe a prophecy he's supposed to write in super clear letters on a stone so that anyone who is even running by could read it clearly, it says. So it's an explanation. What is the book of Deuteronomy? We're being told right here. Here it is. What's Moses doing for the next 34 chapters? He's expounding now law. Remember, what's our Hebrew word underneath law? You know, just so I don't have to fill the chalkboard, I kind of have a new idea. Tell me what you think about this. What if I were to write up here sometimes? Is that okay with you? Great. Awesome. I think that'll go more quickly and I won't get as dirty from the chalk. Let's blow it up a little bit. Is that okay? Can y'all see that? Okay, good. Oh, 21st century. It's wonderful. Okay, in Hebrew, it's the word Torah, which at its most basic meaning means teaching or instruction. So Moses, this is an exposition or an expounding of the Torah or of the laws. Therefore, it's the second law, or it's the second giving of the words, and Moses is going to be preaching and expounding on the Torah. And what this basically does is it kind of lets the rest of the book unfold for us right here. So if you look at chapters 1 through 4, it's the first main block, and just kind of actually skim with me. Go down to verse 9, and if you have chapter headings, or little section headings, you're going to see exactly what's going on here in the first couple chapters. What does your heading say at verse 9? Yeah, leaders appointed. This is retelling that story where Moses was overwhelmed with the weight of judging disputes among all of the people and so on. And so his father-in-law steps in, which, I'm like, whoa, that's kind of, stepping on my toes a little bit. But actually Moses really likes his father-in-law. And he tells him to appoint a whole bunch of leaders. Do you remember that story? Exodus chapter 17. Go to verse 19. What's the chapter heading you got right there? Yeah. The spies are sent into the land from Kadesh Barnea, Numbers chapter 13 and 14. So he tells that story all the way down. He's going to retell the story. Literally, he just retells it in exactly the way that we just read it in the book of Numbers, which is why I'm making an executive decision that we're skimming this morning until we get to chapter 4, because we just read all of this Is that okay with you? Okay, we just read all this. So he's going to retell the story as he goes through chapter 1 about how the people didn't trust in Yahweh, and therefore they faced God's judgment to wander in the desert. Go to chapter 2. How does chapter 2 begin? Chapter headings? So wanderings. Yep, this is about the 40 years that they wandered. At the end of the 40 years, they started to come around the region of Edom and Moab. And do you remember Edom and Moab? They're relatives of the Israelites, but they wouldn't let them pass through their land, and they got into some fights and so on. And he just retells that story in chapter 2. Go down to verse 26. What's beginning in verse 26? Yeah, they're having battles with this guy, Sihon, king of Heshbon, who lived in precisely this region where they're camping now. So we read about that in the book of Numbers, chapter 21. Look at chapter 3. What's the heading there? Yep, there's a king named Og. Now that sounds like a caveman or something. Anyhow, so we defeated Og. That was also in Numbers chapter 21. Look down at verse 12. You're going to thank me for skimming, because we're going to get to chapter 4, which is the most awesome chapter in the book. Verse 12, the Reubenites and the Gadites and the Manasseites, they ask, hey, can we camp over here on the east side of the Jordan? Remember that story? It's like from 2 weeks ago. That was Numbers chapter 32. Go down to verse 21. We'll pick up the story here. At that time, I commanded Joshua, "You have seen with your own eyes all that Yahweh your God has done to these two kings," the two guys that we just talked about. "Yahweh will do the same to all of the kingdoms over there where you are going. Don't be afraid of them. Yahweh your God himself will fight for you." That's a huge, huge theme in Deuteronomy as we look forward to going into the land, is that Israel is almost a passive bystander in Yahweh bringing his justice on the Canaanites and then in giving the land to the people of Israel. That's a big theme. Yahweh is fighting for you. Now, at that time, I pleaded with Yahweh, "O sovereign Yahweh, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds and mighty works that you do? Please let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country and the Lebanon. But because of you, Yahweh was angry with me and would not listen to me." Do you sense any bitterness? Any bitterness at all? Right? So do you remember the story? This was maybe a month or so ago about why Moses can't go into the land. You remember that story? So it was about the water out of the rock. God told him to speak to the rock, and what did Moses do? He said, "Listen, you rebels." And he hits the rock twice, and he says, "Do we have to bring water out of the rock for you?" And there's that whole deal. Yahweh said that Moses acted out of unbelief or unfaith. So, he's got an edge to him. Wouldn't you too? He doesn't get to go into the promised land. He wouldn't listen to me. That's enough, Yahweh said. Don't bring this up anymore. Go up to the top of Pisgah and look west and north and south and east. Look at the land with your own eyes, since you're not going to cross this Jordan. But commission Joshua, encourage him, strengthen him. He will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see. So he stayed near the valley of Beth Peor. And then, so all of this was historical review. Here's where we've been. And then this introductory section ends with what I think is one of the greatest little sermons in the book, right here. "Hear now, O Israel, the decrees and the laws that I am about to teach you." This is also another little Hebrew word. I should have thought of this a long time ago. What's wrong with me? Hear or listen, you probably know this. In Hebrew, it's the word Shema. Shema, which literally means just to hear or to listen. And there's one of the most famous prayer in all of Judaism is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, which summarizes all of these chapters at the beginning, and it also begins with this phrase Shema. Sometimes I pray it at the end of our gatherings. So that's how he begins. Listen, listen. Listen, Israel, to the decrees and the laws I'm about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live and may go in and take possession of the land that Yahweh, the God of your fathers, is giving you. Don't add to what I command you, and don't subtract from it. Keep the commands of Yahweh your God that I give you. So in the book of Deuteronomy, this is Moses expounding, or Moses expositing, or preaching, explaining the law. But whose commands are they ultimately? It's Moses' words in the book, but what does he say? Who's actually speaking in the book? Yeah, it's this merging of the words of the prophet. He's viewed as the prophet here. And therefore, it's this word that comes to Israel, and you can't just make it whatever you want it. You can't just add to it or take away from it. We really like that part. Chapter 7 is so good, but definitely not chapter 13. No, thank you. So it's this very, Deuteronomy has this very clear, kind of developed idea of the way that God's word comes to his people. It comes from outside ourselves. It comes into a people who have a really marked and checkered and flawed history. And it comes to us, and as we see, it's going to speak both a word of challenge and grace at the same time. It's really beautiful. So don't add, don't subtract. You don't get to do what you want with the word of Yahweh. Verse 3. You saw with your own eyes what Yahweh did at Baal Peor. The Lord your God destroyed from among you everyone who followed the Baal of Peor. But all of you who held fast to Yahweh your God are still alive today. That was the incident right after Balaam in the book of Numbers. See, this is such a great paragraph. See, I have taught you decrees and laws as Yahweh my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and your understanding to the nations, who will hear about all of these decrees and say, surely this is a great nation. It's a wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near to them the way that Yahweh our God is near to us whenever we pray to him? And what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws that I'm setting before you today? Okay, let's pause right there. So this little paragraph, it's worth just starring and underlining. This little paragraph is the best summary of the purpose of the 613 laws in the Pentateuch that you'll find anywhere in the whole Torah, because it's giving you a rationale for why Israel has been redeemed and brought into a covenant relationship, and why he's giving them all these commands in the first place. So just let's reflect on this paragraph real quick here. So verse 6. What will the laws, if you follow and meditate on the laws of the Torah, what kind of person will it make you? It'll make you into a certain kind of person. So wise. I'm guessing that's not the first thing that would have occurred to you, right? Wise. You would think, well, it makes me obedient or something like that. No, it makes you wise. And wisdom is about discerning what is good from what is not good, or from good and evil. So wisdom and understanding. And then look down at verse 8. What characterizes all of these laws and decrees that are going to be coming? What's their character? Down in verse 8. What kinds of laws? Right, they're righteous. They're righteous. Okay. So, and who's looking on to Israel, and who will learn something about Yahweh by looking at a wise people who follow righteous laws? The nations. So do you see, there's a whole storyline underneath here. You have Israel, it's like on stage, so to speak, and they're brought into the covenant, and they're given these teachings and these instructions, and then, is it just that Yahweh likes Israel more than anybody else or something, and why is he doing this? Well, Yahweh has his eye on all of the nations, and he wants all of the nations to learn something from what's happening on stage. Does that make sense? So this takes us back all the way to the bigger storyline of the Bible right here. Key, most important chapter in the book of Genesis for understanding the flow of the storyline of the Bible. Anybody? I'm so fishing. That's not fair of me. I'm sorry. I should just say Genesis 12 is the most important chapter for understanding the storyline of the whole Bible. We'll just go there real quick to remind you. I bring it up all the time. This was the call of Abraham and God's promise that he's going to make Abraham into a great nation and bless him. He's going to make his name great, which means his name will become known to more and more and more and more people across the earth. Your your name, and you will become a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So God chooses one nation, not just because he likes those people more than anybody else, but this is a part of how he's going to bring blessing to all the nations of the earth. How? Well, the story doesn't say here. You just have to keep going. So this was one key chapter. The next key chapter in this storyline here was in Exodus chapter 19. It's right when Israel is brought out of Egypt to the foot of Mount Sinai. And let's look at verse 4. Yahweh says to Israel, "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." These are the words. This is exactly how the book of Deuteronomy begins, right there. These are the words that you are to speak to Israel. So we have blessing to the nations. And then Exodus 19, Israel is called a kingdom of priests. And this is absolutely crucial to understanding Israel's role. So priests, I've explained this before. Priests are people who go in between God and the people. So who's the God in the storyline here? What God are we talking about? Yahweh. Who's the priest? Israel. And who are the people? Now, does Exodus 19 say who Israel is a priest for? Yeah, it doesn't say it. It says it implicitly because Israel has been taken out of whom? Out of all of the nations. You're selected to become a priesthood so that you will mediate between Yahweh and all of the other nations. So this all goes together here. And what Deuteronomy 4 is giving us is, what verses is this? 5 through 8. This is giving us another kind of step forward in this storyline right here. How is it that Israel is going to mediate Yahweh's character and Yahweh's goodness to the nations? How is Israel going to be this beacon that the nations can look to and see and learn about Yahweh? And this paragraph tells us right here, what's the purpose of all these laws? Is to shape the people of Israel to become a wise and understanding people. And then verse 8, let's keep going here. The word righteous is absolutely key in, we'll do another one here. Tzedek. Tzedek is the word for righteousness, which literally, in its most basic terms, it's a relational term. It means right relationships, or to be in right relationship. So these are decrees and laws that are all about achieving right, equitable relationships among human beings and between human beings and God, and so on. That's what all of the laws are aimed at doing. And so this is, remember, Deuteronomy is the locker room speech. Moses is giving this new generation a framework for why they're called to obey. Obedience is a part of their mission, so to speak. It's the way that they become, what Jesus would later say, the salt of the earth, the city on the hill. In fact, I think when Jesus says to, these Israelites that he's gathered together as his disciples, you're the salt of the earth. You're the city on the hill. He's calling back this ancient vocation of Israel to be a light to the nations by being a people shaped by the teachings in the Torah and so on. Now, this is the locker room, so we're very optimistic right now, right? So don't forget about the book of Numbers and forget about the story that you know of how this is going to happen. This is at least how the nature of the covenant is being set up here. Now, we know how this is going to go. Is Israel going to be shaped into a wise and understanding people? Answer, not really, sometimes, but for the most part, no. Is Israel going to become a nation utterly shaped and transformed by Yahweh's righteousness? No, not so much. And so, here's where we're going to go from here. Actually, put your thumb here. Go to chapter 5, or just turn the page to chapter 5. So, chapter 4 closes with, we're going to finish it, but it's this great sermon to follow the Torah. And then what it kind of entrees you into is this next section that begins with the Ten Commandments. And then what you get in 5 through 11 is a whole bunch of like little mini sermons. It's like Moses collected a bunch of sermonettes about why we should obey the Torah and why obedience to Yahweh is the best possible thing you could do. These are really stirring chapters that we'll explore for the next month or so here. They're awesome. And then, go forward to chapter 12 with me. Look at how does chapter 12 begin? Here you go. These are the decrees and the laws. And that begins this big block, the center block of the book. And it's just a whole bunch of decrees and laws, lots of them. Go forward with me to chapter 27. Now, what begins at chapter 27 is, so, hey, here's where we've been. Israel, here's who you are as a people. You're priests to the nations by following the Torah. You should really, really, really follow the Torah. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of sermons as to why. Okay, here are the laws of the Torah. Can you see the flow of the book, how this fits together here? Chapter 27 begins this concluding block of the book. And what happens is Moses is going to bring all the elders, and they're actually going to have like this ceremony, this big ceremony, and Israel's going to say, yes, we're going to follow the Torah. Chapter 27, they do this long ritual, and look at verse 9, and just kind of look down through the chapter. What's the repeated word in this chapter? Chapter 27. Cursing. Cursed is this person, cursed is this person. So they're announcing all of these curses. Curse on all these different kinds of people who don't obey the Torah. Then look at chapter 28. How does chapter 28 begin? Yes, if you fully obey Yahweh and follow all the commands, here's all the blessings that are going to come on you. Blessing, 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 blessing. Go down to verse 15. However, if you don't obey Yahweh, your God, cursing, 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 cursing. So there's 14 verses of blessing. And then there's, starting verse 15 all the way to the end of the chapter, it's something like 57 verses of cursing. So which do you think, just put the two on a scale, which do you think Moses, what does he think about how the story is going to go? You can kind of see. What happens, and again, all these ending chapters, the word blessing and curse, he's trying to make it as stark as possibly can. You guys, just follow the Torah, for goodness sakes. It's going to go horribly if you don't. And then he concludes the book with 2 long poems, these really beautiful poems and songs that challenge Israel to follow the Torah. And then in the last chapter of the book, Moses finally dies. He croaks, and he's buried. And then that's how the book of Joshua begins. So that's the framework. That's the framework for the book. But it kind of, after the historical review, it all flows out of chapter 4 as to how the rest of the book develops. Isn't this cool? Deuteronomy is really, really quite amazing. And so it becomes this long meditation on obedience and disobedience and why we don't obey. It's a meditation on Yahweh's justice, on his righteousness, on how Yahweh wants to achieve right relationships. How you guys doing? Okay, good. Let's go back to chapter 4 and finish out then his little introduction to the Torah. Chapter 4, I think we were in verse 9. Only be careful. Watch yourselves closely so that you don't forget the things that your eyes have seen, or let them slip from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Remember the day that you stood before Yahweh your God at Horeb, when he said to me, assemble the people before me to hear my words, so that they can learn to revere me as long as they live in the land, and may teach them to their children. And so you all came near. You stood at the foot of the mountain while it was blazing with fire to the very heavens, with black clouds and with deep darkness. Then Yahweh spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but you saw no form. There was only a voice. And he declared to you his covenant, the 10 what? The 10 words. Remember, the 10 commandments. Whenever you see that phrase, 10 commandments, it's literally in Hebrew just the 10 words. He declared to you the 10 words, which he commanded you to follow, and then he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And Yahweh directed me at that time to teach you the decrees and laws that you're to follow in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess. So we're recalling the incident at Mount Sinai that I drew up here for weeks and weeks and weeks, the mountain and the cloud and the lightning and what happened there. And Moses highlights a really, really key thing that happened right there. There was a cloud. They were standing at the foot of the mountain. What did they not see? A form. What meaning? yeah, like they didn't see Voltron appearing out of the cloud or something like that. I'm, your God, or so, I don't know, whatever. He didn't see, a old man with a white beard or something like that. The whole point is that Yahweh never took physical form in appearing to them. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't real to them. How did Yahweh become real to them? Not by physical appearance, but by what? By a voice, speaking. So this is a really key, once again, we're back to this concept of the Word of God, or God's Word. That the way that this God, Yahweh, acts is not by magic show, appear, and, ooh, wow, I'm an old man on a chariot, or something like that. It's about Yahweh summoning and speaking to people. And so he declared the 10 words, and Israel's whole covenant relationship then is going to be bound up with listening and remembering the deeds of Yahweh and the words of Yahweh and how they go together. Now, there's a big implication of this. Look at verse 15. So you saw no form of any kind the day that Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb, out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, a human being, formed like an animal on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the water below. And when you look up in the sky, and you see the sun and the moon and the stars and all the heavenly hosts, don't be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping these things that Yahweh your God has apportioned to all nations under heaven. But as for you, Yahweh took you and brought you out of the iron smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be the people of his inheritance as you now are. So they didn't see, Yahweh's never taken any physical form or shape to them. Therefore, what should they never, ever, ever try to do? Kind of follows. Try to represent him by any physical image. So this is everything that flows out of Israel and the prophets about idols flows right here out of this moment, and really these words right here in Deuteronomy. Yahweh never took physical shape, therefore don't try and use any created thing to represent him. Why? I mean, what's the big deal, really? It's a golden calf, Like, what's the big deal? So part of this is cultural distance for us. Most of human cultures for most of human history have had something like this going on. Modern Westerners, we're the odd ones in human history who think that we don't have idols. We just have them in other ways. But it's a really intuitive, I think, inclination of the human heart. So you have forces of nature. Say, you have these bison, that roam the plains. You live off of them. You hunt them, seasonally or whatever, your tribe or something. Everything that you relate to and how you survive your people comes from the bison or something like that. And so you can see very easily how I can't control the bison. They come and then they go. There's mysterious forces. We live, and you can see very easily the human heart will begin to do something to the bison, the herd of bison. I'm just using that as an example, but you guys know what I'm talking about here. So these bison are the means by which we survive. They give us our life and so on. And so we're meaning-making kinds of creatures, and so we begin to attribute to these things powers or realities because, in effect, they control our destiny. They control our lives. And this is just how human history works itself out, whether it's the sun or the river or animals or people. We attribute to these created things traits or roles or responsibilities that only belong to not something that's created, but to the Creator. And this is a part of the biblical argument of why idolatry is so subtle, because it just kind of makes sense. But at the same time, when human beings begin to submit themselves to created things, bad stuff happens. Really bad stuff happens. And this is a part of the critique of idolatry all throughout the Bible, is that when human beings form religious systems that have idolatrous deities represented in them, it slowly corrupts us and begins to dehumanize us in the practice of worshiping these gods. Romans chapter 1 is Paul exploring this basic principle right here. And so it's not just that, Yahweh gets offended because he thinks he ought to be worshipped. The whole biblical argument is that idolatry and the worship of these images actually reverses the relationship, because if humans are made in Yahweh's image and to reflect Yahweh's image, who is set over the animals and the birds of the air? Think Genesis 1. Who are called the stewards to rule over creation? So humans are. And so it's actually reversing that relationship. It's humans putting themselves under the creation as opposed to seeing the creation as a gift from the Creator that needs to be stewarded but not worshipped or given ultimate allegiance. It's very powerful. It's actually pretty profound. And so he says, that's not your lot. Don't bow down to the sun, moon, and stars, things that Yahweh gave to give light and goodness and warmth to all of the nations, and give your allegiance to them. No, I brought you out of Egypt. You're my people. Verse 21. Now Yahweh was angry with me because of you. He's just a little bitter still. He solemnly swore that I would not cross the Jordan and enter the good land Yahweh your God is giving you as your inheritance. I will die in this land. I will not cross the Jordan, but you are about to cross over and take possession of that good land. So be careful not to forget the covenant of Yahweh your God that he made with you. Don't make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything Yahweh your God has forbidden. For Yahweh your God is a consuming fire. He's a jealous God. We came across this word jealousy, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Trying to think. Actually, we have in a number of ways. Ooh, remember the law about the jealous husband? That was a weird chapter. Numbers 11 or whatever that was. Okay, so jealous. So we have talked about this. In Hebrew, it's kin'ah. And in English, jealous doesn't have any positive associations, does it? Would you ever use the word jealous in a positive way? Probably not. I don't think so. We could take a vote on it, but I'm pretty sure we would vote not. So in Hebrew, so imagine a word that captures the emotion behind jealousy, but there are also moments where you could be jealous for someone in a really good way. And that's what the Hebrew word is here. So I've heard, different explanations, passions for someone's well-being, something like that, where it's a lot like what happens when there's a really, Memorial Day, there was a big group of like 8 planes flying over Portland in formation. Did anybody see those? So I was out just doing something, mowing the lawn or something, and I was so excited because my son Roman loves airplanes, and so I was filled with kin'ah, and I ran inside and grabbed him because I wanted him to see this so much. Kin'ah, that's exactly right. So I was filled with energy and passion, and I ran up the stairs and grabbed him, this kind of thing. That's kin'ah. So I want him to experience something in a good way. Kin'ah can also be the thing that gets raised up inside of me if I see, this is what just came into my mind, if I saw a lion coming down my street or something, and it was Roma, I would be filled with kin'ah to protect him or something, or car, whatever. The point is energy, emotional energy and passion for someone's well-being. There would never be a lion coming down my street. So the point is, Yahweh is a consuming fire. He's jealous for your well-being. And he knows that if you give allegiance to idols, this will slowly begin to dehumanize and distort and corrupt the people that he redeemed out of Egypt precisely so that they could be freed of all of that and given wise, righteous decrees, and so on. Verse 25. Now, after you've had children, and even grandchildren, and you've lived in the land a long time, if you then become corrupt and make any kind of idol, doing evil in the eyes of Yahweh your God, provoking him to anger, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you this day, that you will quickly perish from the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not live there long. You will certainly be destroyed. Yahweh will scatter you among the peoples. Only a few of you will survive among the nations to which Yahweh will drive you. There you will worship man-made gods of wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or eat or smell. So this is profound in a lot of ways. You can begin to see, even right here, how does Moses think the story is going to go, right? And so he says he has envisioned that they're going to come into the land, it's all going to go horribly, and they're going to be scattered. They're going to be exiled from their land. And what are they going to be doing once they're scattered among the nations? They're going to be doing exactly what they wanted to do, which is what? Giving their life and their allegiance to human-made gods of wood and stone. In other words, their part of Yahweh's judgment is letting them get what it is that they want. This is very, very similar to Romans chapter 1, where Paul says God's wrath is coming against humanity, and what is the form of God's wrath? It's God giving them over to the decisions that they want to make apart from God. It's It's very similar. I think Paul took a lot of his inspiration from Deuteronomy. Do you know Deuteronomy is the most quoted book by Jesus and Paul alongside the book of Psalms? If you get Deuteronomy and you get the book of Psalms, you will get Jesus and Paul in a really significant way. But verse 29, it's not the end of the story. But if from there, out there scattered, you seek Yahweh your God and you find him, if you look for him with all of your heart and with all of your soul, when you're in distress and all of these things have happened to you, then in the later days you will return to Yahweh your God and you will obey him. For Yahweh your God, he's a merciful God. He's not going to abandon you or destroy you. He's certainly not going to forget the covenant he made with your forefathers, which he confirmed to them by oath. So Yahweh will bring justice and he'll deal with you and give you over to your decisions. And so from your point of view, you might think you're done with Yahweh, but is Yahweh done with you? No, Yahweh doesn't break his promises. Verse 32, this final little paragraph here. We'll close down in a few verses here. Ask now about the former days, long before your time, from the day God created humans on the earth. Ask from one end of the heavens to the other. Has anything so great like this ever happened? Has anything like it ever even been heard of? Has any other people heard the voice of God speaking out of the fire as you have and lived? Has any God ever tried to take for himself one nation out of another nation by testings, by miraculous signs, by wonders, by war, by mighty hand and outstretched arm, or by great and awesome deeds like all of the things Yahweh your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? He's preaching right now. He's getting his preach on. You were shown these things so that you might know that Yahweh is God, and besides him there is no other. From heaven he made you hear his voice to discipline you. On earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words from out of the fire. It's because he loved your forefathers and chose their descendants after them. He brought you out of Egypt by his presence and by his great strength, to drive out before you nations greater and stronger than you, to bring you into the land, to give it to you for your inheritance as it is to this day. So acknowledge and take to heart this day that Yahweh is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. Keep his decrees and his commands, which I'm giving you today, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, that you may live long in the land Yahweh your God gives you for all time. Amen? And amen. Come on, bring it. This is the point at which we're supposed to be going like, amen, come on, now bring it. That's what's happening right here. And that, as he transitions, that's what all of these chapters are. When you read them aloud, you have to read them with kinah. You have to read them with passion, because that's what we're going into here. So notice the themes that go together here. You have the prohibition for idolatry, which is really about Yahweh trying to protect the humanity of his covenant people. And then you have this assertion here over and over and over again that Yahweh is the one true God, because what other God has ever revealed himself in history the way that Yahweh has? And so as we just think about at least closing down even today, Jesus quoted from the book of Deuteronomy so many times in the Gospels, and he sees a straight line from Yahweh acting in the Exodus and in the giving of the Torah, leading up to Yahweh acting in himself and in what he was doing. And so I think as Christians, we continue this line of, in a really unpopular way, of asserting that in Jesus, there's something utterly unique about the Creator God revealed that you simply cannot find anywhere else. It'd be interesting to kind of rewrite this paragraph, but retelling the story of Jesus. What other God has become human, and given his life and given his love for us, and so on. That's exactly the tone of what it means to hold allegiance to Jesus. So it's powerful. There's a lot here. I'm going to close in prayer and let you take what you need to from this. Let me close.